Jesus didn't have a problem with people that's in the streets. He had a problem with religious people.
How can I help anybody when I was not even able to help my own son?
I would never do that. And I became that in a matter of minutes when they took my pain pills away.
And I said, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.
This is Faith in Your Recovery. I am Randy Davis. Welcome to the battle. Once again, as always, we're thrilled to have you with us. Make sure you like, you subscribe. We've got our QR code on there. If you want to donate and support what we're doing, we'd always welcome that. We appreciate your time. Make sure if you've got a question to type it in there. We're live. We want to deal with that. We want to be able to reach you. And if that's through a question, hey, that's a victory for us. We welcome it. Our guest today coming to us from Tennessee at this time, Jeff Jones. Welcome, Jeff.
Randy, thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
Well, we look forward to hearing what you've got to say. Let's start off by what life's like for you right now, Jeff, professionally, personally, anything you want to share with us so we can enjoy our time here together.
Yeah, great question. That's a great lead in. So I was in Colorado for a little over 40 years. I was a therapist there. And a couple years ago, I sold my house and did the unknown world of living out of my van. And that was inspirational for me in a number of ways, in that I knew it was time to get out of Colorado and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And the transformative part of this journey for me was in October of 23, I got really sick, and a lot of what I have done for my own health is alternative medicine, nutraceuticals, amino acids, things like that. So when I start getting sick, I bump those up and everything I did was not working. And I eventually went into a hospital and I was scared because I didn't know if I would come out alive. And I saw the staff in there as angels, and I had an outpouring of gratitude for being held in this container of safety and health. And I didn't die, obviously, but when I got out of there in my healing process from pneumonia, I realized at some point I will die, and I want to leave a legacy. I want to contribute in some way. And what I've been doing for over a decade is focused on families and addiction and trauma, and approaching addiction and the family is starting to work with the family first while their loved one is still in active addiction. And that's not the norm. That's not the traditional perspective. And the other thing that I do here that's a little bit out of the norm is I let families know about an approach they can use to address symptoms they may have from living with addiction. And by using amino acids and nutraceuticals, substances that are non-toxic and non-addictive, as opposed to our traditional approach, which uses substances which are toxic and potentially addictive, i.e. pharmaceuticals. So I really like to give families choice right from the get-go, and then support them to make their own best decision for their situation. And then I stay with them to help them be accountable to their own decisions.
That sounds intriguing. I'm interested to hear more. But my first thought along with that, what do your colleagues in the same genre, the same field, what do they think of this approach? And then we're going to certainly allow you to defend, explain,
Yeah.
whatever you want to do. But what's the general feedback that you get from them?
That is a really, really good question, because I think a lot of them, they don't really understand what I'm doing, and they may just nod. Um, but when they ask a question, when we can have a conversation like what we're having here, um, then I can start to explain like why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I mean, I was an interventionist for a number of years. I was on an intervention team with an internationally known interventionist that teaches intervention all around the world. And I've been second chair in interventions in people's homes. So I've seen things work really, really well, and I've seen things work not so well. And by that, I mean, if that individual who they want to get into treatment does not go into treatment, a lot of times interventionists are encouraged to have strong boundaries with their family member who's choosing to still be in active addiction, and say things like, you are never welcome in my house again, you will never see my children again as long as you're still drinking or using drugs or whatever. And I was the secretary for a national intervention organization that now no longer exists. But when I was a secretary, I knew a lot of very good interventionists. And I heard from people that sometimes after, you know, the individual decided not to go into treatment, that they would end up ending their life like a week or two later. And that's information that doesn't show up on the 9 o'clock news or whatever. And so it's like this addiction in the family thing, it's like, it is a big deal, and it's not for the meek, i.e., people who engage with me. This is a transformative process for them. And by them, I'm meaning that one person in the family who has the most energy to make change in their family, change that can influence their loved ones' decision to be open to a new perspective of recovery.
Explain this process to the layperson like myself, someone who doesn't have that experience that you have,
Yeah, yeah,
someone who hasn't been involved as an interventionist or with interventionists. Go ahead and
yeah.
share.
So I have gotten this question enough times that I have a book coming out later this month called Rethinking Addiction: The New Family Recovery Solution. And so the table of contents is essentially the process that I offer. And the first chapter is about mixed messages about addiction. So there's been mixed messages for centuries about addiction. And
Amen.
it started back when the Egyptians and Turks thought there was a cure. The Egyptians thought flogging and shaming was a cure. The Turks thought pouring molten lead down the throat was a cure. And then it was the Greeks, I think, who they didn't go into the cure, but it's more like they thought they could avoid drunkenness. It was called drunkenness, not addiction. And by making beer steins with clay and putting amethyst stone around the rim, and when the alcohol ran over the amethyst stone, it prevented them from getting drunk.
I
And
have to wonder if, you know, centuries from now, they're going to look back at our means and modes today, and they're going to smile as I'm smiling listening to some of this. I'm sure the day will come, we will get there.
yeah,
We're doing our best to be there now. We haven't made it, but
yeah,
I'd love hearing this from you. Go ahead. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
So I mean, it was a choice. It was a moral problem. Now it's seen as an addiction, as a disease. Some people see it as a condition, not so much a disease. Mainstream national organizations, they will all see it as a disease. And I really understand why. Because with a disease, there's one organ in the body that is a deficit that's not working. And with addiction, we all know that one organ is the brain. But anyhow, mixed messages, chapter 1. And then chapter 2 is black and white thinking. Like, we get an impulse, it comes up, I automatically believe it. It's the truth, it's the whole truth. I don't question it. And, it like black and white thinking just isn't an addiction thing. But when there's addiction, black and white thinking in the individual increases. And it's not only that, it becomes addiction, has its own rules of engagement in a family. And it overpowers how a family has done family before the addiction. And it overpowers the family's rules of engagement. So black and white thinking, addiction's rules of engagement. And then chapter 3 is both and thinking. And so I encourage family members to expand, like, this is black and white thinking. Just look at that individual with the addiction, stay focused on them, and keep poking them to change, which they're not going to change, and they're going to get defensive. And so both and thinking is we expand, we take a pause, understand what all's out here around the addiction to where this can inform this. And what's down here in the black and white thinking can inform this, because both and thinking includes black and white thinking. Like, if I was standing in the middle of the road and a bus was bearing down on me, I would need to get out of the way quick to save my life. Like, I don't have time to go, is that a brand new bus, or is that a 5-year-old bus? I would be dead. So black and white thinking is important. We need to remember that, but not take every impulsive message as the truth, where both and thinking, two things that are true can exist at the same time. And there's aspects of truth in multiple perspectives. And when we can recognize them and weave them together, a family can come up with the best decision for their family at any given point in time. Chapter 4 is a both and decision-making model, and chapter 5, 6, 7 is my program, which all 3 phases start with enabling health. I use enabling because in the addiction recovery space, enabling just means one thing. We all know it's a bad thing. And the family, they're enabling the addiction. And I'm going, well, no, the word enabling means we can enable multiple things. And when we are conscious, when we've expanded our thinking, we can either make a conscious choice to enable old patterns that reinforce addiction, or enable a healthy new dynamic.
So it can easily be plus or minus depending on our approach with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So family members, ideally, family members, they can slow themselves down, consider multiple options, and then they can make the best option at any given time. And yeah, sometimes they may have an impulse and they may really need to say things to get it out. And it's like enabling old patterns that reinforce addiction. And, at some point, hopefully they will learn that's not really that helpful. I'm not getting my needs met. They're not getting their needs met. And our relationship is going further apart. So when they start enabling, well, phase 1, which chapter 5 is enabling health within my body. And I, have a lot of things that I can introduce people to enable health within their body. All of the amino acids, pro-recovery diet. Family members can learn the pro-recovery diet and actually incorporate that into their home. If their loved one is in the home, there's a lot that they can do from the standpoint of enabling health. And if they're not in the home, there's still a lot they can do in the communication and in the relationship. So chapter 6 is enabling health within our relationships, starting or eventually with that family member who's still in active addiction. And then chapter 7 is enabling health within how our family does family together.
Okay. You may have mentioned this early on, but how long will it be before the book is out?
So just before I connected with you, Randy, I got a document that all chapters are in there. And for the last month, I've been going back and forth with an editor. So this weekend, I will read it. If I'm okay with it, then it goes on to formatting. And by the end of November, it will be in Amazon. And actually, I'm going to have a pre-launch thing on my website, will be a pre-launch page. And, I'm going to try to let people know when the book is, cost, and I can get it out there and ask people to, put a review in Amazon. And, that's the way the world works now. And
For
so
sure.
I'm trying to follow those rules.
Is this your first book?
Yes, sir.
All right. What inspired you to write it?
Well, yeah, kind of circling back to that, when I was in the hospital, I thought I was going to die. And
Yeah.
then when I got out, I was like, I didn't die. I'm going to die someday. But is there a way that I can contribute to where something can continue from me after I die? And so I have made this a very specific program. And my hope is that this will be a legacy that continues after my death.
I got that.
And I don't plan on dying anytime soon, Randy. Let me tell you.
Well, we don't want to lose you soon, all right? But of course, that's not our final call.
Yeah.
Regardless, you had said earlier you wanted to leave a legacy. So this is a piece of that legacy
Yes,
through
sir.
this
Yeah.
book. Yeah. What, other than, it leaving an everlasting tool for people to turn to, what's your purpose in it? What
Yeah.
is the absolute goal of the
Yeah.
book?
Yeah. So great question. So the why, as to why I'm doing this, is I grew up in a family with addiction, which is no surprise. To you, I'm sure. And so when I was a child, my grandfather showered more love and attention upon me than anybody in my whole life. It really caught my attention. I was just in heaven. I thought it was about me. It was about my gender, and my sister and my 3 female cousins. They let me know that gently. Really, they really did. I didn't want to believe that. I was in my own denial. It's like, Jeff, just say no to that love. And so my mom hated him. Something happened between my mother and him when she was a teenager, and she never spoke about it, but I saw just in her reactions that she hated him. And like, my sister and I were down at his cabin in Kentucky Lake. My mom and dad took us down there. And as an example, my mom would be kind of along the wall, orienting around the wall of the room, and my dad would be behind my mom, kind of having his hands on her shoulders to nurture her, to comfort her. And my mom was not one that needed nurturing. And she ran the family in a very big way. But in Kentucky, she was quiet and she was mousy. And so as a child, this caught my attention. And as I got older, I never really forgot it. And, when I was a teenager, I would ask my mom about my grandfather, and my mom would say, Jeff, the only thing you really need to know about your grandfather is he was an alcoholic. And I was like, yeah, there's positive things about him. I know there are. Like, he invented some things, without getting down a rabbit hole too far. I knew there were, but my mom just couldn't go there. And then as a teenager in my 20s and 30s, I did my own drug and alcohol thing. And, I marijuana was probably my drug of choice, but it was pretty easy for me to stop when I wanted to stop. Well, I say easy, it wasn't really that. I was a therapist doing 4 groups a week for the state of Colorado drug and alcohol program, people who got caught drinking after driving. And I was listening to a lot of stories, but still on like Friday nights, I would go to this place that had really good dark beer. I'd have a burger and a beer and chat it up with friends and drive home. And just from listening to these people's stories in these groups, I realized I was taking too much risk.
Creating your own story, and not a good one.
Yeah. So it took me 6 months, Randy, of listening to these stories and still going out on Fridays and having a beer and a burger and driving home a couple hours later. And, it wasn't like I was in bad condition. That said, there were times when I did drive home, when I was in bed, that I didn't remember how I got home. And I went out the next day and looked at the car and was like, oh my gosh, did I hit anything? Did I hit anybody? Is there a dent in my car? And like, yes, I had those times, but really for me to stop drinking, it was me being a therapist in this program, listening to other people's stories, and they educated me. And it took me 6 months to get that education to where I was like, I'm just not going to drink anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. You were dealing with the consequences through the individuals you were in the therapy group with. I don't know. Of course, it's that denial process, but we're all guilty of that fact that it won't happen to me. Yeah. I can do this. I can handle it. And we find out that's simply not the case.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Sometimes too late, we find out that.
Yeah. It's really true. The whole denial thing is so tricky, and addiction is like the only disease I'm aware of. There may be others where part of what's going on with the distorted, impaired brain and thinking is denial.
Yeah.
Heavy duty denial.
And we've got to choose how we're going to deal with that at some point. And it sounds like yours must have been a gradual kind of change. Or was there that moment, that instant that you knew, boom, today, this is the moment?
That's from how I think about it here. I am a gradual change kind of guy. And the whole program that I set up is incremental change, and it's incremental change even to get to a formal intervention. So I am an incremental change kind of guy. And there wasn't like, I don't have one of those stories where, the room was filled with light and I, had this change that for the rest of my life, I'm behind.
I understand. That is the way I came to relationship with Christ. It was that gradual, as John Wesley would say, warming of the heart.
Yeah.
And I recognized something had happened, a change had taken place, and I grew it from there. and it
Yeah.
continues to grow. We're all, regardless
Yeah.
of those moments of denial, one way or the other.
So, Randy, can I take off on that comment there
Absolutely.
and go into the what I call foundational support of either religion or spirituality or
Yeah, I'll
divine
get you
law
there. Please.
principles. And so my addiction nutrition mentor is Christina Vasilak, who has the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition. And she wrote a book. And in that book is the three-legged stool she uses as a metaphor for addiction and a metaphor for recovery.
My
And
granddaughter used this illustration during her graduation. Now, I'm sure it wasn't related the same way. Go ahead.
well, so the three-legged stool, the leg of the stool that the majority of treatment centers, I believe, miss is the bionutritional leg of the stool. And so when that leg is not supported, it's a unstable stool, more chance for cravings, etc. But the other two legs, one is biopsychosocial. So a lot of the social relationships, which a lot happen in the family, and that's where they learn relationship. Then the other leg is spiritual. And they like if they just have one leg that they're working, they're not going to be as stable. So that's my premises here. And the foundational support, when I work with family members, I want to get to know them to see what their belief system is around religion or spirituality, or if they don't have one, I have found divine law principles to be very helpful, specifically in this situation. And the two divine law principles that stand out, one is for every person, they're on their own path, their own journey, and inside of themselves, they have tools to actually facilitate their journey. And then the other divine law principle is for anyone to actually help anyone else, they need to fully embrace their own change to the fullest extent. So, this is family members embracing their own change and transformation. And when they have engagement, connection, practice with that spiritual leg of the stool, or any religion that they have background with, or I was in Colorado for 40 years, so Buddhism, Native American practice, Sufism has been a part of my spiritual support system. As well, I grew up Christian. I had my own church wounding, which kind of prevented me from practicing in that house kind of thing. So I hope I'm just being transparent
No, we
about
want that.
my relationship with spirituality, religion, divine law principles. And the name of your podcast here is Faith in My Recovery.
I'd love that. You had told me early on that you were a little out of the box with your thinking and experiences, not the way you labeled it, but what you said. I have a question about that three-legged stool. Do you believe they all need to be the same length? And not necessarily designed the same, but the same length?
Yeah. That is a super good question. And my own personal feeling there is no. And I can base that on initially what I know about abnormal genetics or genetic polymorphisms. And
You're over me, but I want to hear it.
Well, so we all have different ancestors, for, as an example, people whose ancestors are mainly Irish, they're going to have certain genetic abnormalities. And for instance, they can easily be born with an additional alcohol dehydrogenase liver enzyme. So when they drink alcohol, their liver processes it incredibly efficiently. They don't get all that intoxicated. They don't have hangovers, and their brain makes this thing called tetrahydroquinolines, THIQ. And I actually have a friend back in Colorado who wrote a book, and he said in the evening after work, he would come home and have a drink, and his brain worked better to where he could write his book. And so it's my guess that his primary alcohol biotype was, this THIQ kind of thing that I was describing. And so for these people, when they drink, they become activated. Alcohol for them is a stimulant. Generally, alcohol is known as a depressant, but for some people, it's a stimulant. For these folks, it's a stimulant. They drink alcohol, they're the life of the party. Or consider those teens, for instance, who are, they're uncomfortable, and, a lot of social relationships may freak them out. And then they have a little alcohol, and they are the life of the party, and they come alive. And why our system of care does not acknowledge that, I don't know. So this information comes from Dr. Joan Matthews Larson, who wrote the book 7 Weeks to Sobriety, and the subtitle is something like The Nutritional Program Proven to Fight Addiction, something like that. But that book is kind of a core, one of the cores of my whole program.
So I see where that leg can be different than the other two. Okay, I get that. But in their own way, how does that stool stand if all three legs aren't equal in length, regardless of design or creation?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that I do is, like, I was a therapist. Now I don't do therapy anymore. I do coaching, and coaching and setting up, designing a program for someone that they engage in daily. And we have, like, initially, I've had communication with people just about daily. And it could be just, 10 or 15 minutes in the morning. But coaching can really help people to have a stool where all the legs are not the same length, like you described there. And, but all of the things that we know and love about recovery, like self-help group meetings, and, individual therapy, and, therapy groups, cognitive, whether it's cognitive behavioral or whatever, all of those things are wonderful. I support all of them. However, I advocate for this third leg of the stool that so oftentimes is missed or ignored, or whatever the right word is there,
So many of us,
because that can just make it so much easier.
yeah.
And Randy, I know I'm interrupting you, but you
No,
asked me my why. The
yeah.
why here is the way the system of care is set up right now. And for years, every day, about 300 people have been dying from overdose or addiction related cause. Every day. And, like, I would think there would be room for improvement to bring those statistics down. And I really see family members in the absolute perfect role to engage in this early, especially when we don't shame them and see them as, oh, they're a bunch of codependents and enablers, and we need to separate the family and just work with the individual separately. And some of that is good for a period of time, but then there's nothing to bring them back together. I have tools for that. I don't need to get into that, but I interrupted you. So that's my why.
No, that's not an interruption. That's an explanation. Thank you. I wanted that. But you've just messed up my neat little world, so you know. I picture this stool with those legs screwing on and everything, taking them off, putting it back in the box. All of a sudden, leg number 2 doesn't fit because it's longer than the other 2. I can't get it back in the box here. I've got to
Yeah.
give this some time. But I love the challenge that creates for us. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're getting, wow, we've already been at this about 35 plus minutes. So we've only got about 10 left.
Okay.
What do you want to leave the folks with? You've already given us a ton.
Yeah.
I don't want you to think otherwise.
Yeah. So what I think one thing I can do, and I'll try to do it pretty quickly, is give an example of what change for a family member could be like.
Awesome.
And I am reflecting back on a woman that I worked with a good number of years ago, and her daughter was living in an abandoned house with friends, and they were doing heroin and fentanyl, what we would know as a crack house or something. And she would have contact with her daughter every now and then, and her daughter would be clear with her about what she was doing in that house with her friends. And the mom would get activated and she would get scared for her daughter, and she wanted to save her life, of course. And so she would just jump right in with her impulsive thought to tell her daughter what to do to save her life. And what happened is her daughter didn't want to hear it. So their relationship went apart. After I started working with the mom for several weeks, she decided she wanted to have a scheduled lunch every week with her daughter, like Wednesdays at noon, and they would meet at a certain place. I saw that as this was a practicing grounds for the mom I was working with. The mom saw it as, it was an opportunity to see her daughter. And after a couple weeks of that, she came back and she told me, she goes, Jeff, I think my daughter is actually starting to listen to me and trust me. And I was like, okay, so tell me, how did that happen? And she said, well, when my daughter would say things, I felt that impulse in my body. I bit my tongue. I was quiet and I just started breathing. And, then I responded with something else just so I could build this rapport with my daughter. And then a couple weeks later, that abandoned house got raided. The police came in. The daughter actually called the mom. The mom went and got her. And, the mom was driving there and she was saying her prayers. She was a very Christian woman. She was saying her prayers. And the daughter got in the car and, eventually the mom was like, well, do you want to try treatment? And, immediately the daughter had an impulsive reaction and the mom just listened to it. And then after a few minutes, she said, how about if we try treatment, detox, and then if it doesn't work for you, we can leave. And the daughter agreed to do that. And of course, these people in detox facilities, they're trained very well to deal with all this stuff. And, to make a long story short, the daughter was in detox, and the mom did not have enough money for treatment. So, and it was a detox that offered non-narcotic detox, and they had a sober living house in a different state. Like the mom was in Iowa or something, and the sober living house was in Texas. She went down to this sober living house. I continued to work with her with this amino acid protocol and, pro recovery diet. And, she was in heaven. And then I transferred her to a colleague. And, probably 9 months later, she relapsed. So that's the transparent part of the story. But when families change, individuals change.
Amen. Here's going to be the final question. You've got about 2 minutes on it. The holidays are coming up on us, and of course, you would know better than I would know the family stresses when there's someone in the family struggling with alcohol or drugs. What's some good advice for the holidays for those families that are dreading getting together but want to?
So that scenario is actually in chapter 4 of my book. But what I can say is, cutting to the bottom line here is family members can say, hey, this Thanksgiving, I've decided I'm hosting the meal. So I've decided that our whole family is going to have an alcohol-free Thanksgiving. And so, do you remember that breathalyzer that we got? So I have one of those. It's up in the closet. Everybody who comes into the house, everybody, not just you, not just this person who has the addiction or we're super concerned about, but everybody that comes into my house is going to blow into that breathalyzer. And if anybody has alcohol in their system, they are not going to be welcome at the meal this Thanksgiving. And yeah, I'd be welcome to hear if you have comments about that. But that's what I'm thinking.
Awesome. Awesome. I appreciate that. No, I can see that happening. And if I'm the individual with the alcohol problem, if, I'm not going to feel attacked by that, I'm going to love the quality of it and the trust factor. And if my family will let me back in for that moment, who knows where we can go from there when we can relate.
Yeah.
Listen, Jeff, this has been awesome. I know you gave me some warnings there at the start, but I'm at peace with all of that, okay, and feel good about it. Thank you for your willingness to join us, your authenticity, transparency. That's what we're about here because we want people to know. We recognize it's not an easy battle.
Yeah.
But above all else, you've got to stay in the battle. We say often that next prayer, that next corner may hold the answer. Give it one more try. It may get you there. God bless. Amen. Happy holidays to everybody. Take care. We love you.
Thank you very much, Randy.
Amen.